On this video, I'm going to talk about why banks in general are more risky than investment platforms. Hi everyone, so go over to adamfire.com, especially if you're an expat or a high net worth individual. Now, on this video, I'm going to talk about why banks in general are riskier than investment platforms and some of the big misconceptions people have about risk. Now, if you think back to 2007, 2008, Lehman Brothers, which was listed on the stock market, went bust. Now we're in a very different era now. The banks are in a stronger position than they were before. They withstood COVID very well. However, it does show a wider issue. When it comes to the banks, they have a leverage or debt model often, and sometimes the whole pack of cards can come crashing down. Very seldom, especially in the case of a big bank like Lehman, but it can happen. Whereas in comparison, if you think about an investment platform, what is an investment platform's basic business model? They make money from your money in terms of fees. Seldom do investment platforms lend money to other people. And if they do, it's usually through something called Lombard loans, which I've explained before, which is basically where they'll lend you money, but it's based on your own equity. So for example, if you have 100,000 in your account, they might lend you 50,000, for example, but then if you don't pay back, they've already got the equity and they could sell off your investments. They don't lend to mortgage holders and so on. They don't have a debt-fueled model. Now, when it comes to investment platforms, if you then think about it, the only way an investment platform realistically could go bust is if almost everyone leaves the investment platform, because let's say even 80 or 90% of people gradually over time leave the investment platform. The investment platform could probably still stay in business in those circumstances. They might have to get rid of a few people, they might have to downsize their office space or work from home for a few months to lower the cost. But if they're only making money from your money, they're not engaging in debt or any kind of risky activities, then in general, it's a sturdier business model than just focusing on debt. Now, don't get me wrong, there are arguments on the other side. Some people would say, well, the big banks though are too big to fail and the regulators have learned their lessons from 2008 and 2009 and indeed the Great Depression. That might be true, but people tend to forget those lessons over time. So as the financial crisis of 2008 goes into the rearview mirror, gradually over time people might forget those lessons that, as much as people don't like bailing out the banks, maybe it's a necessary evil. Also, there are new regulations and a lot of banks now, they do segregate the assets and so on and so forth, which is what investment platforms have always done basically. So there are arguments on both sides. And of course, it depends if you're comparing apples with apples or apples and oranges, right? Because obviously if you compare one of the biggest well-capitalized banks in the world and you compare it to an investment platform which was started yesterday, then of course the bank is safer for investments. But in general, what I have found is that people are too reassured by government guarantees. Personally, I think there wouldn't be a need for government guarantees if everyone invested on investment platforms for the reasons I gave before, or at least there wouldn't be as big a need for a government guarantee. Beyond that, I think whilst there was a lot of cynical attitudes towards the banks in the first 5 years after the financial crisis, a lot of people though still have this idea that, oh, the banks are here to help us, whereas an investment platform is a private company, right? But in reality, as I've discussed before on one of my videos, the banks are often some of the most cynical companies in the world. Like for example, I've had numerous clients even who they've received a call from the bank saying, oh, it's from the security department, and conveniently it's always when they're sending money to another investment provider. So I think there are still those old-fashioned attitudes that a government guarantee is better than something like a segregated account system where your assets are segregated from the company's balance sheet and that somehow the banks are here to serve you, whereas a private company like an investment platform is just there for making profits. In reality, they're both the same. The only difference is a bank has more power in many ways because they've got millions of clients through normal deposit accounts. But in general, for me personally, I'm always more reassured by an investment platform. The only time I've ever had a bank has been where basically I've had an investment platform, then a bank has taken over that particular account. So I did invest through a investment platform a few years ago, but there was then a buyout where basically a banking group bought out that investment platform. And I didn't leave them just because they were a banking group, but they basically kept the existing system the same. It was just a change in terms of the name on the top of the account, basically. So in general, personally for me, I would never invest for a bank, whether it's HSBC, whether it's Barclays or whatever, unless they've got something which is very different. So for example, Saxo Bank, I'm not saying they're perfect, but Saxo Trader, even though there are better options out there, is much more just an investment platform. So even though it's called Saxo Bank, it's really just a trading platform. They're not pushing you into Saxo Bank products. You've got an open system and so on. There are some banks who have gone into that system, but in general, many of the banks who just want to push you into their own products. So HSBC want to push you into HSBC Asset Management. They don't want to give you the preferer, the wide range of options that exist. So in general, regardless of where you're going to go for an advisor or DIY invest, I would stay away from the banks. I would use the banks for banking, just for deposits, and use an investment platform for investing. How can I help you? In two ways. First of all, are you an expat, a high net wealth individual, or just somebody who lives in a part of the world where it's difficult to get access to quality investment solutions? In which case, go onto my website on adamfayed.com and find out more. If you don't fit into any of those categories, then in which case there's a range of free material on my website, on this YouTube channel, and indeed on my Quora, where I get over 200 or have received over 231 million views in the last few years. And finally, if you want to actually read my thoughts in more detail, go onto Amazon and find my book on there.